Supermarket in Precinct 4, at least 7 days before said meeting. Hereof fail not, and make due return of this warrant with your doings thereon to the town clerk of said act and at the time and place aforesaid given under our hands the 2nd day of October in the year 2002. David Farrell, Chairman, Mr. Damaris, Vice Chairman, John Ezra, Mary Hope, John Irwin, Clerk. And then it's posted by Randall Peterson, Constable. I, the end, signed a constable in for the town of Ashland, is hereby certified that I have posted attested copies of the stated town meeting warrant at least 7 days for the time of said town meeting in the following locations: Town Hall, 101 Main Street; Fire Station number 151 Main Street; Ashland Convenience Store, Pizza Palace, 72 Union Street; Middlesex Savings Bank, 2 West Union Street; Charles Street, Office 47 Pond Street. Also certified to return the original warrant to the town clerk for clerk's record. Randall Peterson, Constable, dated October 7th, 2002. I'd like to call up the tellers: Alex Shapiro, Steve Teller, Barry Rosen, Alan Bavanek, Judy Teller, Mark Cassoni, Suzanne Kenny, Nevin Sannabrook, Curtis Hoffman, Michael Caplow, Bruce Hart, Dan Amico, Ed Kavanaugh, and John McGrath. Ms. Flynn. You will need to be carefully count now to report the vote in the section of the hall of time, please. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask for a typical motion to extend the floor to certain non-residents: Mr. Dr. Boyd, Town Manager; Dr. Richard Hoffman, Superintendent of Schools; Mr. Steve Crowin, Town Planner; Mr. Dave Thomas, Town Council; Michael Conley, Special Treasurer; Mr. Mark Warren, Health Agent; Mr. Karen Hanoi, Town Accountant; Mr. Paul Benetti, Library Director; Mr. Coach Milano, Water and Sewer Superintendent; Mr. Charles Judd, the Town Clerk's Office; Mr. Joe Baresic, the Assistant Assessor; Mr. Frank Tedesco, Architect of the Learning Group; Mr. Clark Roll, the Town Fiscal Agent; and Ms. Shelley Cohen, Vice Principal. Such a motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. And motion to permit the moderator to refer to the substance of the articles rather than read every article. Second. All in favor, please say aye. Please. Okay. Is that a little better? Are you sure? Yeah? That's better? Okay. All right. Okay. Now, matters of procedure, how we will act. The town meeting acts upon motions brought before us. The recommendations of the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen by themselves, or through the Town Manager and the Planning Board, are considered to be motions made and seconded. We'll treat all substitute motions as motions to amend and then treat them before the main motion. And we ask that all substitute motions be made in writing. Only 2 substitute motions may be on the floor at any one time. We'll treat them in the order in which they are raised, except we'll treat the larger sum or the longer period of time first. Any 7 voters may challenge. The moderators call the vote. In this case, we'll have a standing vote. Now, I do want to say tonight, being that we have a large number of people, the way that, and we will have some standing votes, the way that Arthur Shapiro has organized the counters is that we have basically of the main floor, the first section up to the aisle, and then the section behind in the aisle, and then the section behind in the aisle on the other side, and then the section in the front. So please, when it's time to vote, you've got to stay in your sections to help the counters out. Take care of it. Okay. Also, there'll be separate counters for each of the sides of the bleachers. Okay, so to help the counters out when it comes time to vote, just please stick with your section where you see it. After you're recognized, please state your name and address and direct all your remarks to the moderator. We have a microphone over on this aisle and a microphone in the center. So if you want to speak, you just line up the microphones and I'll see you. As to reconsideration, with the exception of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, it's required that a motion for reconsideration be made on the same night as the original vote. You may treat it at that time or reserve it to a later time. In any case, the person making the motion for reconsideration must announce that he or she voted with the prevailing side at the time of making of the motion. Tonight, we have not reserved any portion of the hall for non-voters. Non-voters have a room set up down the hall this way in which there are TVs set up for everybody in here, with the exception of certain consultants or employees or the press, should be a town registered voter and able to vote. And it would be helpful if everybody took a seat. Okay. Now, a couple of announcements. We'd appreciate it if everyone would turn off their cell phones and pagers. That would be helpful. Second, this is for the boards that are sitting in the front, because it's been mentioned to me that because we have a flat hall and not a raised auditorium, it would be helpful if when anyone in the front is speaking, if you stood up so that everybody in the hall can see you when you speak. Okay. Now I'd like to make one more statement. This is a personal statement. Tonight, as you know, Dexter has announced his retirement and will be leaving town shortly. And tonight is the start of his final town meeting as town manager. I, as moderator, want to add my thanks to those of the town for all the help he's given me in running an organized and well thought out town meeting. He's been a tremendous help. We miss his briefing book, his knowledge, his calm demeanor, and I personally want to say, as the moderator, thanks for all the help you've given me in respect to town meeting. It doesn't work. Hello? Is it working? I want to thank everybody very much, especially for coming out to this town meeting. I mean, this is a big thing for the town. And we all have put a lot of work into the effort tonight, as we did in April for the special town meeting. For me to thank all of the boards and committees and town employees that I have worked with or that have worked with me over the last 9+ years, it's certainly been helpful to me to put together what Tom pointed out. And without the support of all of you taxpayers and town residents, my job would be far more difficult than it has been, although certain times it has been difficult. I enjoy my job here very much. I love to come to work. It'll be something that I'll miss. I'll be around for a while getting things going, at least for the May town meeting, although I may not be at this position in May. And I'll be around, even though I don't live in Ashland. I certainly will come back because, as I say, I love coming to work. I love the town. It's been very good to me, and I hope that I've been good for it. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, also this evening, it'll be her last Board of Selectmen meeting and her last town meeting for the town of Ashland. Selectman Mary Hoke will be moving on to Florida for a new venture, and we'd like to, the Board of Selectmen and town meeting, would like to wish her the best in Florida, and if we could, give her a round of applause for her participation in town. Okay, now, town reports, and I'd like to call on Kathy Salmon.
We're waiting for our presentation. This is why I wouldn't run the computer.
I think they were entrance slips. Pink meant you were a town resident, so you got into the hall. No, you don't need them. Take notes.
Okay, we'll get started. Can you hear me? Is it on? Okay. I'm Kathy Salmon, chairman of the FinCom, and the FinCom is here with me as well as Adam's sister over there. We thought that this year for the fall town meeting, we'd give you just a little update from the spring, since there were so many issues open at spring town meeting, since we hadn't received... Is this better? Okay. We thought we'd just give you a very short little presentation to update some of the issues we left open for you at Springtown meeting. The first one is the budget update. When we voted at town meeting, we didn't have a cherry sheet number from the state, and we didn't get one until late this year. The net cherry sheet number in the original budget was $4.7 million. We actually got $5.1 from the state this year. So even though we were afraid they were going to cut the money, they didn't, which adds up to about a $400,000 change. That's the good news. The other side of the news, I won't call it the bad news, is that in the articles that you will see in the warrant tonight, just about all of that money has been spent, $360,000 to be exact. But I guess we're glad that we got extra from the state so that as we have additional needs in the fall, we could go ahead and vote for them. Next. The next item is updated water and sewer rates. We warned you that the sewer rates were going up this year, and they did, from $4.40 to $6. We will tell you, though, that the base water rates decreased by $20 for the base rate, not the user rate, in this fiscal year, so you got a little bit of relief on your water bill. Not much. The senior tax relief programs. One of the things we're committed to as a committee is to provide as much senior tax relief as we can find. This year we doubled the recommendation from last year, and I'm happy to tell you that just about all of that money is being used by seniors. Next. I told you this would be quick. The impact of the CPA. We just wanted you to know, just to revisit this quickly, this is what you voted at your Maytown meeting. If you have an average assessed value of $270,000, which is the average for the town, you'll be paying an extra CPA assessment for this year on your tax bill of $86. If you look at the next slide, there's an article on the town warrant to reduce that to 0.5%. I'm not going to get into why you should or shouldn't vote for that here, or all the ramifications of voting for it, but if that 0.5% is passed, the $86 will go down to $14 on your tax bill. I just wanted to give you that information. The next slide is the tax rate impact of capital projects. We figured since we're talking about the school tonight, we might as well talk about the whole picture. The whole picture also includes the community center, which has already been voted, and the town hall, which will be voted at this town meeting, probably not tonight. If you look at it, this is not an average spreadsheet. This is actually year-by-year impact. I'm going to leave the school portion to the school finance presentation, because there's a separate presentation for the schools to give you all the facts. I will comment that the community center in the first couple years, years 1 through 5, is going to add 16 cents to your tax rate, and years 6 through 10 is going to add 14 cents. The town hall, if it's voted as currently in the warrant, years 1 through 5 is going to add 21 cents on the tax rate, and years 6 through 10 is going to add 19 cents to your tax rate. And after that, you can see the picture, it's declining. The library has not been voted by the state yet. We don't know if we've received the grant in this year's allocation. They're going to vote in November, so we did not include it on this slide. If it's passed, it will be approximately the same figures as the community center, 16 cents per dollar on the tax rate the first 5 years and 14 cents per dollar on years 6 through 10. Per thousand, sorry. And we just did it. A little slide to show you, if your house is assessed at around $200,000 in real dollars, the tax impact of all three projects, the schools, the town hall, and the community center, will follow that green line. So you're looking at, in year 2005, about $450. Your home's assessed around $300,000. In that same year, it's going to be around a $700 hit to your tax bill, and if your home's assessed at $400, it's going to be a $900 hit to your tax bill. Obviously, the higher the assessment, the more the hit to your bill is going to be. And that is all we have to say. In summary, we are going to leave our comments for the individual articles to the individual articles. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, are there any other committee reports unconnected to particular articles? Seeing none, move along to Article 2. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from the available funds in the Treasury or some money to supplement the several appropriations voted under Article 3 of the May 2002 annual town meeting. Fiscal year 2003 budget, pass and vote or take any action relative thereto. And the Finance Committee recommends that the town vote to transfer $106,000 from the Water Enterprise surplus account, to transfer $100,000 from the Sewer Enterprise Fund surplus account, and to raise and appropriate $125,788 for the accounts listed below. I think I'll read them, there's only half a dozen or so. Water Enterprise Fund Utilities, $31,000. Water Enterprise Fund Wages, $75,000. Sewer Enterprise Fund Plant Sewer, $100,000. Animal Control Wages, $2,288. Police Department Overtime and Training, $70,000. Insurance, $40,000. Town Manager Audit Services, $12,500. And Town Accountant Wages and Recertification, $1,000. A total of $331,788. Discussion. Mr. Boyce.
Mr. Moderator. These are various requests from the departments to supplement their budget that was voted in May, and each of the departments is listed here. The Water Enterprise Fund is for operation and maintenance of the water treatment plant while it was in startup mode. We anticipate collecting the $31,000 from the contractors. That was the electrical bills that were incurred. We had to pump the water to the residents as part of, but on the same meter, the water that was pumped to waste through the treatment plant during the construction is included in it. $75,000 is for overtime wages. If you remember back in the spring, the water department superintendent and I came to the Board of Selectmen and asked the board what their preference was. Pay overtime to man the plant 16 hours a day while it was operating, or incur a water ban. The board opted to spend the overtime money. This is what the request is. Even though we had to implement a ban, it was for a different reason in the spring and in the fall rather. That ban is on an odd even as of October 1st, and hopefully with the rain tonight we'll be able to lift that ban altogether. Incidentally, that ban is a restriction placed on the town by the Department of Environmental Protection based on the level of the reservoir. Even though we don't draw water directly from the reservoir, we're not under the influence of the reservoir. There is some water, but the water level of the reservoir contributes to the level in the wells. So that's the problem, and that's the reason if you didn't read about it in the paper. The Sewer Enterprise Fund request is for two things. For police overtime at the Pond Street Sewer construction site, If any of you have been down there, we thought originally we could do with 2 police officers, one on either side of the detour or construction site, rather. It's not a detour. As it turns out, we've had anywhere between 5 and 8 officers, and even through the night because of the type of construction that we're running into down there. Animal control wages is to restore a weekend coverage in animal control that was eliminated in the May budget. Police Department overtime and training is to restore monies for recommended training in the police department for the rest of the fiscal year. Insurance is to cover police and fire health and accident insurance that hasn't been paid yet. When we did the budget, we anticipated the insurance to remain the same. The property and casualty went up substantially, which left us short in a bill that we had yet to pay. Town manager audit services are for transitional services with the treasurer collector's office. That comes out of the audit services comes out of the town manager's budget under the direction of the Board of Selectmen. When the treasurer collector changes, which it is about to, we need to do an audit. The balance of it is to help the town implement what's called GASB 34, which is a requirement that all municipalities throughout the country face, having to account for fixed assets, which we haven't had to do in the past. And town accountant wages and recertification are numbers to recertify the town accountant that were again left out of the May budget. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Discussion, Ms. Pope.
It's working? All right. I was just wondering for the Finance Committee, all these total up to basically, I guess, what our extra funding was by the state. Will we have any funds left over in reserve for any other overruns that we may encounter for police overtime, fire overtime, or anything for the rest of the year in reserve funds? And what would that amount be? Basically, if we appropriate the suspended, do we have anything in our savings?
May I answer that? When we left the town meeting in May, we had a balanced budget with a 0 bottom line. And that's because we didn't have the state aid numbers. We didn't have local receipts that come through after the 1st of July. State aid actually didn't come through until early September. With those numbers plugged into the spreadsheet, we had a positive bottom line of approximately $500,000. Town meeting tonight will leave a positive balance of approximately $240,000 of available appropriation, which, based on the Finance Committee's recommendation, is necessary, which will effectively lower the, or keep the tax rate from raising. I won't say it lower the tax rate, but will offset an increase in the tax rate. So there is sufficient funds, and again, it's based on what our best guess is when we prepare for town meeting, March, April, and May, close the fiscal year in June, the end of June, and then get state aid numbers. My policy has always been to go as conservative as possible, because it's a whole lot easier to come back in October to ask for additional funds than it is to come back in October to cut budgets a third of the way or a quarter of the way through the fiscal year. Much more difficult for the schools should we have to do that, because they've already got contracts with teachers. So this has been my policy all along. It's worked quite well. There is a surplus on the bottom line based on the numbers that we get after town meeting.
Further discussion? Yes, sir. Come right up to the microphone.
My name is Bill Peake. I'm at 70 Oak Street. And, Mr. Moderator, I was wondering, there are only a couple of line items here where the amount requested and the amount recommended are different. One of them is Police Department overtime and training, and the other is Town Manager audit services. And I wondered what the impact of that difference would be in terms of the services delivered to the town.
Mr. Booth. Mr. Moderator. The police department number is the amount that was cut for the entire fiscal year back in May. In discussions with the police chief, both myself and the Finance Committee, we put back the recommended training and additional funds for overtime for training and sickness that was eliminated from the budget, and I believe that the chief can speak for himself, but I believe based on those discussions that the chief can live with this number. The town manager audit services, there was additional amount put in for a procedure audit of the entire town on my exit. I haven't got a number for that, so I can't say to the selectmen that you should put it back in, but the Finance Committee's reserve account of $100,000, which is what Ms. Hope asked about, one of the questions that she asked. If it's something that needs to be done and something that the Board of Selectmen can support, certainly would be a legitimate request to the Finance Committee for a transfer, or at worst case, come back in May for additional funds.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, on the Finance Committee's recommendation, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the article passes. Move to Article 3. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds in the Treasury such sum of money as may be necessary to pay bills from previous fiscal years pursuant to provisions of General Law, Chapter 44, Section 64, passing the vote or taking action relative thereto. Finance Committee recommends that the town vote to transfer $3,129 from the Water Enterprise Fund surplus account to transfer $2,450 from the Sewer Enterprise Fund surplus account, and to raise and appropriate $7,738 for the several accounts listed below. They list about 16, 17 bills totaling $13,315.98. Discussion. Any discussion at all? Okay. Yeah, Mr. Boyce.
Mr. Mayor, these are bills that were not submitted in time at the end of the close of fiscal year last, and would actually be middle of July of this year, the last fiscal year. Traditionally, we come back in October to appropriate the funds to pay for these bills. They're all legitimate expenses of the several departments that are listed here.
Okay, this will require a 4/5 vote, but I'll start with a voice vote. On the Finance Committee's recommendation, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. And all those opposed, no. I hear a no. Well, within one, we'll stand and vote. We'll stand. With one vote, we'll stand. You're a prince. You're a prince. And that passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Okay. Moving on. To see if the vote, Article 4. See if the town will vote to amend the Ashland Code by adding a new chapter, Chapter 9, Community Preservation Committee, which I will not read the body of the language. Pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. The Finance Committee recommends that the town vote to amend the code as printed in the warrant with the following changes. Delete subparagraph 9-2.f. Change new subparagraph 9.-2 sub G to 9-2 sub F. And change the new subparagraph 9-2.f so that it reads two members. So it should be read two members shall be registered voters of the community at large. Discussion. Mr. Boyce.
Mr. Mayor, this is a requirement under the general laws to implement that Community Preservation Act which the voters passed last May. It has nothing to do with changing the impact or the numbers within the Community Preservation Act. Under the CPA, this committee is required to be established by bylaw in order to implement the terms and conditions of what the voters have already voted upon. So, in my opinion, this is only housekeeping. It creates a committee. It tells what the committee has to do. It tells how the committee is appointed, how it's made up of, and it's basically its sole function is to make recommendations to town meeting on how to spend monies that are collected under the CPA. Further in the warrant, there'll be an opportunity to change CPA if you so choose, but this has to be in place in order to implement it. Monies will be collected. Without the committee, they will sit there, but they will be collected. Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Hoffman.
Curtis Hoffman, 58 Hilldale Road. I wonder if the members of the FinCom could explain their reasoning behind the change that they've recommended, and dependent upon their statement, I may have a substitute motion.
Is this on? Is it on? John Cohen.
Most of the bylaws taken right from the state law. When it was written, Section F was added in. I don't know that there was a strong reason, but by taking it out, it actually puts it closer to what the state law recommends, or as a starting point. We're certainly free to add it, but by making it up to the selectmen, it just gives the, in my opinion, greater representation of the town as a whole as opposed to the particular committee. If we were to leave Section F as it were written, it would be up to the Affordable Housing Committee to decide who that member would be, and it's my understanding that that committee is often not fully staffed. And by leaving it up to the selectmen, it doesn't prohibit someone from the Housing Committee, but it doesn't restrict it either.
Does state law require that one member of the Ashland Housing Authority be on the board?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Telek.
Mr. Telek, the Affordable Housing Committee is always fully staffed. There is not a problem with the Affordable Housing Committee. The Board of Selectmen did vote. We had some discussion on this article, and we did vote to favor the Finance Committee's recommendation. And the reason being is because the appointment comes from the Board of Selectmen, and we are aware that the Affordable Housing Committee job and what they're doing, and we thought that we could appoint the person from the Affordable Housing Committee to the committee. So that was why we voted to support it.
Ms. Henderson.
Carol Henderson, 72 Franklin. In the past, when we have committees, we often vote for the, we've had budgetary reasons for not funding committees. I'm concerned because there have been years when there's been no money given to these committees, and then they have expenses. If we so vote for this, can we put a substitute article in to at least give them some startup expenses money?
This is just a bylaw to establish the committee. It's not a budgetary warrant article.
But there will be, paperwork expenses, that kind of thing. Most committees have some kind of expense, and I'm concerned that we're creating a committee without funding it.
I think we should let the committee get together and make their proposal rather than pick a number for them.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Yes.
Hi, I'm Roberta Stolman from 28 Woodridge Lane, and I guess I still don't understand the reason for changing and deleting 9-2F. If someone could explain it to me, please. It seems as if the committee, the Affordable Housing Committee, is fully functional. It seems as if the Board of Selectmen is about to make a commitment to appoint someone from that committee anyway, so I don't understand why not just leave it the way it is. It seems like the change, the major impact of the change is to give the Board of Selectmen the opportunity to appoint 2 members of this committee instead of 1. Can someone explain it to me, please?
Adam Schuster from the Finance Committee. Some of our discussion was that the committee as structured here, as Dexter said, A through E are required. There are no choices. We have no choice but to adopt A through E. F and G are the only optional, if you will. There was some discussion that the committee might be weighted too heavily toward the housing folks, and that as the needs in town and the things that are important in town change, there might be some interest on the Board of Selectmen's part to change the makeup of the committee. And this is redone every year, I believe. The CPA committee is changed every year. So as one area, let's say open space, became more of a focus, they could appoint people for open space or housing. It was just to give the Board of Selectmen more options. That's really the only reason we did it. We were actually trying to help them.
I'm sorry?
We were actually trying to help the Board of Selectmen, that's all.
Trying to be helpful?
To
Okay.
give them more options, that's all.
It just seems like the CPA has housing as a priority, you know, affordable housing.
Well, my understanding is the CPA has
I just
three
didn't
areas of
understand why it
focus.
was out. Yeah, I understand that. I know, the historic, the affordable housing, and the open space.
And the Board of Selectmen would still be free to appoint one or two members of the Affordable Housing Committee, should they so choose. This is not precluding them, this is giving them an option to do what they think is in the town's best interest.
I just thought, I appreciate the clarification. I just thought we needed to be clear that it was not a reflection on the committee, but it was a desire to not heavily weight the committee and to possibly have the flexibility to change priorities.
No, it was no reflection on the Affordable Housing Committee at all.
Mrs. Keller.
Judy Keller, Affordable Housing Committee. I just want everybody to know, usually the state, when they adopted that, there is a spot for the housing. Well, in Ashland, our housing really only takes care of Park Street. It does not do affordable housing.
Mr. Cohen.
I want to express a minority opinion, so I'm standing back here, even though I'm on the Finance Committee. And, you know, there's a general concern in the town of the overall tax rate. And the town initially voted overwhelmingly against the Community Preservation Act, but a strong argument was made that the town was throwing away money, and that if we didn't approve this, and that in addition, we could use those tax monies for things that we were going to do anyway, so it really would be a saving and not just a spending program. And my own personal concern is that if we don't really watch what this committee does, that we could go off and do things to spend money on projects that the town just can't afford. And this committee is very powerful, can recommend things to the town meeting. The town meeting could be taxed, like perhaps people here don't normally go to town meetings. That might happen with other issues. And as a town, we need to watch out for the people who are not able to pay whatever tax rate some people who go to town meeting would like us to pay. So we need to watch this committee very carefully, and if we can keep it under control and have them spend money on things that are in the overall town's interest, then I think the town can stay behind the CPA. But if it goes off and starts doing pet projects of individual special interest groups, then the town is going to stop, withdraw its support from the CPA, and the town will no longer be able to take advantage of the state's matching funds.
Mr. Long.
Terry Valone, 10 Ivy Lane. I would just like to clarify that, and I've taken a 9-week course on the CPA, the committee can only recommend, all the people here in town meeting, will vote on anything that comes before you. So hopefully you'll be listening to what those proposals are. You'll make the judgment when you're fully informed. So it's not clear to me that how the committee is staffed will necessarily impact the vote. So I trust your judgment, and I just think it is important that the committee represent the needs of the town. And Board of Selectmen, if your recommendation is that you need to have 2 slots assigned, then I respect that. But I don't want people to think we'll be ramming things through. That's not possible.
Okay. Any further discussion? Then on the Finance Committee's recommendation to amend the code as they have suggested by adding this section. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. And the ayes have it, and that passes. Okay, Article 5. To see if the town will vote to transfer any funds received during fiscal year 2003 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Social Services for tuition of state wards to the school department, fiscal year 2003 operating budget, pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. Finance Committee recommends that the town vote to transfer any funds received in fiscal year 2003 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to the Department of Social Services as payment for special education tuition to the fiscal year 2003 school department operating budget. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. I have a substitute motion which really is to correct a scrivener's error. That the town vote to transfer funds received in fiscal year 2003 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Education, which is where the funds, I guess, would come from, as payment for special education tuition to the fiscal year 2003 school department operating budget. Okay. Discussion? Okay, then on the substitute motion, that the town vote to transfer funds received in fiscal year 2003 from the Commonwealth of Mass Department of Education as payment for special education tuition to the fiscal year 2003 school department operating budget. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. And that passes. Okay. Okay. Now we get to Articles 6 and 7. I think the way we will proceed is that I will open both articles. I'll read them both. And we will have one discussion. And then we will have separate votes with respect to Article 7 and then 6. In that order. Kathy, that's what you're saying. You want 7 and then 6. Okay. Okay, so we'll start with by reading Article 6. To see if the town will vote pursuant to Section 15A of Chapter 40 of the Mass General Laws to transfer certain parcel of land acquired by the town for municipal purposes, including school construction, from the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen to the school committee, said parcel being shown on a certain plan of land as described. That the article shall not take effect until the passage of Article 7 of this warrant, pass any vote, or take any action relative thereto. The Finance Committee recommends that the town vote to transfer the described parcel of land to the school committee conditioned upon the passage of Article 7 of this warrant, including an affirmative vote on a ballot question excluding debt payments on the appropriation in Article 7 from the limits of Proposition 2.5. That's Article 6. Okay, Article 7. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds in the Treasury, or borrow under the provisions of General Law, Chapter 44 as amended, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, such sum of money as may be necessary to construct, furnish, or equip a new school facility at the so-called Cadre property, and to renovate and or repair several existing school facilities in the town, but that appropriation is subject to the following conditions: an affirmative vote on a question asking that the borrowing be excluded from the limits of Proposition 2.5 so-called, and that except for funds needed to pay costs of planning and design of the project that must be accomplished in order to apply for a school building assistance grant so-called, no funds shall be borrowed or expended for any project authorized hereunder until such project shall have been placed on the school building assistance priority list maintained by the Department of Education or any other similar list, and the School Building Expansion Committee formed under Article 8 of the October 2001 annual town meeting be authorized to negotiate and enter into contracts for the purposes of this article, pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. The Finance Committee recommends that the town hereby appropriates a sum of $41,970,000 to pay the cost of constructing, furnishing, and equipping new school facilities at the so-called Cadre property, and to renovate and or repair the several existing school facilities in the town, and that to meet this appropriation, the town treasurer, with the approval of the selectmen, is hereby authorized to borrow, under and pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 3 and 7, Section 7, parentheses 3 and 7, parentheses 3A, and Chapter 70B of the General Laws, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town, therefore, provided, however, that no funds be borrowed or expended hereunder, unless the council have voted to exclude the amounts required to repay any bonds or notes issued hereunder from the limits of Proposition 2.5, so-called, and provided further that except for funds needed to pay for cost of planning and design of the project to be undertaken by this post, that must be accomplished in order to apply for school building assistance grants on account of such projects. No funds be borrowed or expended for any project authorized hereunder until the town shall have received written evidence that such projects shall have been placed on the school building assistance priority list maintained by the Department of Education of the Commonwealth or any other similar list, and that the town is eligible for reimbursement at a rate of not less than 56.05%, and that the School Building Expansion Committee formed under Article 8 of the October 2001 annual town meeting be authorized to negotiate and enter into contracts for the purpose of this article. Okay, that's Article 7. And I guess we, just so that you have a little sense, we're going to have a presentation. I'll call on John Nealon in a minute by the School Building Committee. And then we'll subsequently have a presentation by the Finance Committee, and then we will open this floor for discussion. Okay, John Nealon.
Good evening. My name is John Nealon. I'm the chairman of the School Building Expansion Committee. I'd like to introduce the other members who are here this evening at the front table to answer questions later on in the presentation. Tony Amico, Tom Sanacandro, Ken Rush, David Teller, Dr. Richard Hoffman, and Kevin Johnson. Also, as part of this presentation this evening, the Mount Vernon Group, and in particular Frank Tedesco, principal of Mount Vernon Group, will be making part of the presentation in connection with the budget for the construction proposal. Tonight is a night for questions and for answers. And as such, the presentation agenda by the School Building Expansion Committee will be as follows. A few brief historical comments, a summary slide presentation which will coincide with the handout that hopefully all of you received as you walked in, a presentation by the Finance Committee as to the tax impact that this proposal makes, and then questions, answers, and comments. 2 years ago, almost to this day, the School Building Expansion Committee was formed by this town meeting. Over the following 18 months, the committee studied the growth issue, confirmed the numbers, selected a site, studied the site, and developed a long-range plan and recommendations for the expansion of the school district. Last May's town meeting said yes to the recommendation. Last May's election said no. Since then, to say that the School Building Expansion Committee went back all the way to the drawing board would really be an overstatement on my part. But we did go back to the room where the drawing board was, and we did the following. We conducted public forums seeking feedback on the particular proposal that failed at the election, as well as the general expansion issue as a whole. We commissioned an update of the growth study to confirm the numbers and do a check and a balance on the previous study. We reviewed the information and data and the previous options that we had considered, and we researched new ideas, in particular the feasibility of modular construction and how that might play a role in this expansion that's so needed in this town. In summary, we revisited, reviewed, and reevaluated all of the needs assessment which we had considered over the last year and a half.
John, can I just hold a second? There are, for those of you who are standing in the back, there are quite a large number of seats in the first 10 rows or so here, probably enough for almost all of you. So if people want seats, there are many seats up in the first 10 rows. Please come up and take them. Thanks, John. A lot of seats. There's also a lot of seats on the bleachers in this area. Okay, John, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As a result of the due diligence undertaken over the last couple of months since last May by this committee, it is the recommendation of the School Building Expansion Committee that the best long-range plan for the expansion of the Ashland School District is as follows. Certain renovations and repairs to the existing school buildings that are now in inventory. The shifting of the grade configuration for grades 1 through 8. And the construction of a new high school facility. The principal cost to the town of Ashland before interest and before reimbursement is $41,967,000. In support of this recommendation, we offer the following information to you in summary form. The growth is projected from the year 2000 to 2013 to increase by approximately 1,000 students within the school district. As of October 1st, 2002, the school population, 2,439. In 2013, it's projected to be approximately 3,300. We learned over the summer that there was some confusion and possibly some misunderstanding as to the last building project conducted back in the 90s. The slide that you, next slide, please. The slide that is now up on the board will show you that no work was done to the high school facility. The Warren School, there were 13 classrooms were added and 11 small group rooms, among other work and construction done at that site. The Mendez School received a new heating and ventilation system, some new windows, a new library, and a computer lab. A new middle school was built. 15 classrooms, 2 science labs, and 2 administration areas. Back in 1994, at the outset of that project, it was projected that in the year 2003, there would be 2,439 students. 2,496 students in the year 2002-2003. The actual enrollment is 2,439. A difference of 57 students with a 2.3 margin of error. We reviewed the options, ones that we had considered long and hard last spring. An issue that has repeatedly come up is how could the cost of a high school be less expensive than the cost of an elementary school or a middle school? And the issue with regards to the expense of the new high school includes what it would cost to renovate the existing high school facility in order for it to remain a viable high school facility over the next 50 years into this century. That is really at the crux of this entire expansion plan. It will cost approximately $12 million to renovate, repair, and make the necessary additions to the existing high school facility in order to make it, in our judgment, a viable high school building for the next 50 years in accordance with the state of Massachusetts construction standards. In September, the state of Massachusetts Department of Revenue released the reimbursement rates for the 2002-2003 year. Ashland's reimbursement rate is 56.05%, approximately 2% less than 2001 to 2002. A snapshot of the proposal by the School Expansion Committee includes the following. Pitaway, preschool and K, Warren, grades 1 and 2, Mendez, grades 3 through 5, middle school, 6, 7, and 8 at the existing middle school high school, which would also include the administrative offices, and the new high school would include grades 9 through 12. Again, cost to the town before reimbursement and interest, $41,967,000. The administrative offices would be moved from the Mendez School up to what would then become the middle school, grades 6 through 8. The next several slides, ladies and gentlemen, break down each school, school by school, showing the maximum capacity presently, the current enrollment, the planned enrollment for the year 2013, as well as a summary of the anticipated renovations and repairs under this proposal. Warren School, Mendez, middle school, high school, and the new high school. Throughout the summer months, this committee sought feedback during public forums held at various sites around town. We made a good faith effort to listen to what people were saying about what they felt was wrong about the previous proposal and the continuing concerns they had about the student growth issue here in Ashland. Several common themes kept surfacing. Cost, the preschool proposal, the greenhouse science lab, and a general concern about the duplication of certain resources, particularly tennis courts and the fully developed field complex which was proposed. After a lot of debate and a lot of discussion, the School Building Expansion Committee reduced the cost of that previous plan by approximately $2.6 million. We eliminated the preschool, we eliminated football grandstand, we eliminated the track, we eliminated the tennis court, we eliminated the greenhouse laboratory, and we eliminated an outside storage building. And we also reconfigured the field complex as had been presented. Again, the next slide will show what the proposal is before you this evening, broken down with the grade configuration school by school, with the costs, net costs of principal only, and total principal costs. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Richard Hoffman, Superintendent of Schools, who will discuss with you the specifics of the high school building, as well as the formula for the cost calculation. Dr. Hoffman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nealon. The first slide talks a little bit about planning the high school, and all of the plans for the high school are basically based on state guidelines and state formulas. When we went to the state almost 2 years ago in December, the state tells you what size you will be building in terms of classrooms, laboratories, how many do you need, and you actually take your projected enrollment and you pretend those kids are in that new facility. So this committee doesn't say we need 9 science labs. The state counts the number of students and they tell you what you will do. And they also determine the cost factors, which I'll get into in a moment. We also held interviews with our current faculty to try to add some features that they thought would make it a better situation for themselves and the students. We visited their area high schools, and there are a number of new high schools in the area, including Bellingham, Holliston, Hopkinton. We reviewed the literature because we're building a school that we hope will be in service for the next 50 years. You and I can't really dream about what some of those features will be, but we did review the literature to try to build some of those things in there, like wireless technology is a big thing today. We're not sure where it'll be. We want to make sure all those spaces are flexible so the building has a long life. We did build a capacity for expansion, just in case more students do move in. we will obviously need more dollars to build, but you won't have to go and build a whole new building. There are several areas in the building where 8 classrooms can easily be added, and the core facilities are large enough to accommodate those new students. And finally, as I mentioned, we did present the initial plan to the School Building Assistance Unit called the SBA, and we did receive a letter from them saying the project was fundable. That doesn't mean approved. Basically means they've gone through the list and they're waiting for us to approve it. Right now, I'm just going to go through this very briefly, and I apologize. I know you can't see this in the back. Hopefully you do have the handout. Just quickly, the enrollment roughly is going to increase by 50%. And so most of the areas within the school, I've only highlighted some of them will be increasing by about 50%, but some a lot larger, and some folks have questioned us on this. For example, the auditorium space, it's going to grow a lot larger because the current auditorium only seats 192. The new auditorium will seat 500. The teacher space at the existing high school is almost non-existent. I showed this to the teachers and they said, where did you find 3,000 square feet? I actually counted the teacher cafeteria and some of the other areas, which you're not supposed to, but just to put something on the list. And so that area is increasing by 150%, and again, based on state standards. This is also written up in the accreditation report, and the final area that just to mention tonight is the guidance and student support service. If you have youngsters in the school, you know it's totally inadequate right now, and so that area is going to grow by about 100%. You've seen, we've tried to post some of the site plans and floor plans. You do have in your handout as well, and these have been at the library and in some of the schools. You won't be able to see this well, but I'm just going to highlight a couple of the sites tonight. The entire site is 52 acres. The school section is 42 acres, and then there's 10 acres on the top right-hand corner that have been set aside for cemetery expansion. We did make some changes to the fields, but there still is a baseball field, a large multi-purpose field that could be field hockey and soccer. There's a baseball diamond, and there's essentially another multi-purpose field that could be a practice football field. However, games for football will be played at the existing football complex. There are no grandstands or those kinds of features for the football field here. Tennis courts have been removed. This is the right-of-way for the high power lines. We have kept the building and all the facilities a good distance from those power lines. This is East Union Street here, and you enter the school there. There's a 100-foot buffer zone here for those residents that have houses right along East Union, and there's a 100-foot buffer for abutters up here off of Cataract Road. The school building footprint is about 197,000 square feet. All these little circles are actually some plantings that will be shrubs or trees. There's a separate community entrance where we can lock off the main parts of the building so that when we have activities in the auditorium, cafeteria, or gymnasium, the rest of the school can be made perfectly secure, which I think is a great feature to try to use the school for the community. So, Tony, I'm just going to move on quickly. This is just again, I apologize, I know you can't see it here. Hopefully you do have the handout. Just the first floor, floor design, just to show you a little bit of it. This is that community core back here. That's the gymnasium on the upper half of the drawing. Cafeteria is here with the kitchen and some teacher dining. And these will all have doors to the outside. And that's the major, it's a very wide hallway so that even a lobby can be used for a small reception. And then you can go right into the auditorium from side or rear. And behind the auditorium are the music room and the choral room. All the rest of this are the academic wings. There's a large central library. It is about 40% larger than the existing library, again, because we're expecting all those students. And again, this whole section can easily be locked off to prevent access to those parts of the building, or we can even open portions of it if we wanted to. This area back here, we've stacked to really try to be efficient in the design. We've stacked them so that these are 4 of the 9 science labs are right here, and then right above it are the other labs. So there's efficiency in this design. Some folks have said, I'm not so sure it's efficient. Believe me, it really is. These are called double-loaded corridors. There are really only 2 major corridors in the whole building, and all of the rooms are off of it, except when you head down to the community wing. It's very efficient. There are courtyards, and there's been some discussion about courtyards. Courtyards will basically be grass and some shrubs, And they're wonderful because they provide natural light to every single room in the school will have natural light. And I can tell you that your kids and your faculty want to have natural light coming in, and they're virtually free as part of the design. I'm going to go on to the second floor. It is a two-floor building, and you're just seeing the upper portions of the gymnasium in the back here, because those are at the double story, as well as the cafeteria area is here. You're just seeing the roof line, rather, for the cafeteria, and that's the auditorium. This is again, the science wings are stacked here. The main entrance for students is here and here, right past the administration. This is guidance in the front, and again, these two major corridors are quite a bit larger. If you have high school students, you've been hearing probably some of them say, I can't get to my class in 3 minutes. Well, this will solve that. This school also has 4 stairways. We only have 2 in the existing school. And times during the day when the middle school students are in the other section of the building, there are 800 to 1,000 students on that side of the building with only 2 stairways up and down. It's a traffic jam in the existing building that is solved here. How is the cost calculated? Again, it's basically a state formula. We have submitted to them a preliminary change in the enrollment projection because last time we came to you, we had 900 students, and now we're saying 985 students. And the allowable square, it's just basically a formula. 155 square feet per student allows you to build the school for 152,675 square feet, basic educational classrooms. And then every project includes additional spaces. For special education, the state allows you a certain amount of more square footage. So we have 4,800 square feet for that. The community use, the portions of the gymnasium, cafeteria, and auditorium, you're allowed to request additional square footage for community use. So that's about 27,000 square feet that we counted towards that. We don't have bilingual education, but that's what the state calls it. We actually do have ESL, and that's just one classroom, which is what we have now. We'll be using that for ESL. We do have some remedial spaces. Those are small instructional spaces. We virtually have none at the existing high school. There will be 6 250 square foot rooms for tutoring and to provide some services in regular education for kids that need some help. Technology space, each computer, if we go with desktop models, there'll be additional square footage for each one of those computers, so that has increased the square footage there a little bit. When you total it all up, the maximum allowable square feet is 206,700, but we wanted to try to maintain our original budget, so our project as planned is 197,000 square feet. It's actually a bit smaller than the state would quote, allow us to build. The next sheet it shows again how the state computes the amount of money that you are allowed to spend on your high school. This board didn't come up with it. The state tells you what you can spend. And it's basically $180 per square foot for the construction and $15 for furnishings and equipment. This budget includes every single stick of furniture that will be in that building, every single computer, every single library book, every single bookshelf that's built into the wall, every weightlifting machine in the gymnasium. All the furnishings are included. And you can see that the project allowable cost would have been $40 million, but we've kind of sharpened our pencils and we've brought the project in. The original amount was $38,200, but we did have to add an escalation factor for inflation of $530,000. So the total high school project right now is $38,700,000. So it's a bit more than that slide. And people have asked us, what's the final cost? You know, well, our architect has been around for many years. They've built many schools in Massachusetts. They hire a professional company to come up with the estimated cost. We don't, again, this committee doesn't come up with it. Professionals put that together, but we don't know the final cost until you go out to bidding. And we'll get into that a little later in the budget, and because you'll keep a line item in your budget for contingency because you don't know. The bid, Medway just went out, they lucked out, their bid came in almost $2 million below. Framingham's bid, they had to go out several times because it came in over their budget. So the final cost is really determined by the bidding process. We will closely manage that with professional management, and we will also include certain penalties, obviously, in those contracts for performance. So I'm going to leave it there. I know this is quick. I'm just going to invite the president of Mount Vernon Group, Frank Tedesco,
to walk through the budget detail of just the high school portion of the project. Mr. Tedesco.
Good evening. In your handout, you'll have this. This is a summary of a much more detailed cost estimate done on the documents that we had put together for the schematic design. And they basically go through, and very quickly, you can see that the various categories are foundations, which include the basement construction. You have the superstructure, which is your steel frame and other forms of structural construction. We have interior enclosure, which is your walls, windows, and doors, and you have your roofing, of course. Then you go to interior partitions, most of which are masonry. There are some stud partitions. We have staircases and other interior finishes. Go to the next one. And so you can go down in this conveying systems, plumbing, HVAC, fire protection, electrical equipment, and probably go to the final summary. Go to the next one, Tom. Yeah, there it is. And this basically gives a subtotal for construction of approximately $26,600,000. We have markup, escalation, and overhead, and the total would be $30,030,000 with a construction contingency of $1.44 million, bringing the construction total to $31,470,000, and that's what we're estimating the actual construction to cost. An earlier slide showed you that there were other costs involved, such as furnishings and equipment and other fees and so forth that go along with it to make it the total of $38,750. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. In a few moments, ladies and gentlemen, when we begin with the questions and answers, more than happy to answer any other questions regarding the budget and budget details. If this town meeting approves the article that's before you this evening, and if the ballot question is approved on November 5th, what happens next? Schematic design would begin. Design development would commence subsequent to that. Construction documents would begin to be prepared. And once we receive approval, which typically happens around July 15th of next summer by the State Department of Education, we would go out to bid through the balance of the summer. The hope would be that a groundbreaking would occur sometime in late fall of 2003 with the opening of the new high school facility and completion of the renovations, additions, and repairs at the other schools by January of 2006. It is the opinion of this school building expansion committee that this plan is the best option for the town of Ashland. We believe it's the most cost-effective and least expensive. It alleviates overcrowding, which is on the horizon at every single school. During the construction, there will be very little disruption of the educational process going on throughout the district. Very importantly, it provides additional space in the future for any unexpected growth. It resolves the outstanding accreditation deficiencies as has been discussed over the last several months. It provides the necessary space for SPED Collaborative and the Extended Day Program. And it offers community access for evening programs and other athletic endeavors in the gymnasium. And it also maintains the reputation for excellence in Ashland that every citizen of this town wants the town to be known for. Now on to the cost. I'd like to introduce Adam Schuster from the Finance Committee, who will present to you the tax impact from this proposal. Adam?
Good evening. Let me apologize in advance. I'm about to present an awful lot of detail and an awful lot of numbers, but the consensus is that that's what everyone wants, and we wanted to provide that this evening. This presentation will essentially have two pieces to it. The first is essentially the presentation that was made at the SBEC Forum a month or so ago. I realize some of you may have been there, but looking out there, the vast majority of you were not. So the information that you have heard that was presented there is only secondhand. You want to make sure you get that information firsthand. At that presentation, we went through the questions that are going to be answered, the process we went through to arrive at our answers, the assumptions that we made, and then we went on to answer the questions that we were going to answer. Since that forum, there have been a lot of questions, a lot of things written in the paper. There's been a lot of confusion over certain issues. We want to try to address as many of those questions, concerns, and issues tonight as possible. The questions we're going to be answering tonight. First, how much will the proposed building and renovation project cost? That is from a total town perspective. And number two, how much will the project increase real estate taxes annually? That is for each of us individually. What was the process that we went through to come up with these answers? And you have some of these slides in your handout, but not all of them. The first step, SBEC recommended the plan that was presented to you tonight. After that, SBEC provided the total project cost figures to the Finance Committee, the Town Manager, and the Town Fiscal Agent. The Town Manager, Treasurer, and Fiscal Agent evaluated the financing alternatives and selected the most likely, yet still conservative scenario. Finally, after that was done, FinCom determined the estimated annual impact on the tax rate. What assumptions were made? We used a reimbursement rate of 56.05%. The reimbursement rate, as I think was mentioned, could go as high as 60%, but we chose not to use that rate. We chose to use a lower rate. There's no way of knowing exactly what the final rate would be. Should the final rate be higher than 56.05%, these costs will be lower. But since it will not go below 56.05% based upon this warrant article, it would not happen. These would be the high end based on that. Also, the state reimbursement was assumed to happen in the latest period currently allowed by law. We'll get into that a little later. If the reimbursement were to start earlier than we have planned, again, the cost would be lower, the tax impact would be lower. The fiscal agent made the assumptions on interest rate, the timing of the state reimbursement. It's important to understand that when looking at these figures, there are really two figures. There's what it costs, the net cash outlay per year, and the tax impact. The net cash outlay was done entirely by the fiscal agent who's sitting right here if you have specific questions. That's not something the SBEC did. It's not something FinCom did. Interest rate assumptions, time to state reimbursement, bond market, that's all something that was done by outside experts. The assumptions that FinCom made, we had essentially dealt with growth of the town. Two different pieces. The estimated annual normal growth rate. That's the growth from people putting additions on their homes, from single-family homes going up, and things of that sort. We also would account for the impact of large building projects. You can't account for something like Gainer's Apartments in a normal growth rate. It has to be figured outside of that. The normal growth rate that we came up with was based on the actual growth rate over the past several years, plus an estimate of this year's growth. After we came up with that rate, we reviewed it with the town manager to ensure that it was reasonable. To further ensure that the growth rate was reasonable, we did not include any growth for anything after the 10th year of this project. When we started looking at large projects, we only included projects that were imminent or reasonably certain. We did not include any impact for the condos, offices, or golf course that Gaynor has talked about building because they're not reasonably certain. The apartments for that Gainer's building are included since groundbreaking appears to be happening next year. When we looked at this, we worked with the town planner to find out what the impact of that would be, the valuation of those apartments. Nothing was included for any growth or any potential growth on the Fafford Sand Pit project. Because looking at your warrant, you'll see we haven't even voted on whether to allow that yet. Since we don't have the zoning, we didn't think it was appropriate to include it. What are the answers? How much will the proposed building and renovation project cost? You saw one number that John mentioned in terms of what construction costs would be. There are many different ways to answer the question of what will this project cost. The answer to each of them would be accurate. Cost is a very confusing term. Instead of using the term cost, we're opting to use the term net cash outlay. So what would the net cash outlay be for the town? Construction costs of $41.97 million. Interest expense based upon the plan we have in this projection, $27.78 million. State reimbursement of $39.1 million. Net cash outlay for the town, $30.65 million. So when FinCom talks about what is the net cash outlay, this is the number we're talking about. How much will the project increase real estate taxes annually? Down the left, the second column, you'll see the tax rate impact. First 5 years, second 5 years. After that, the overall average in the highest year. The tax rate impact would be $1.27 for the first, an average of $1.27 for each of the first 5 years. An average of $1.24 for each of the second 5 years. An average of 22 cents after the 10th year. An overall average of 58 cents. And a high of $1.78 in the third year. If you look across, you see the current assessed values. That translates into what it would cost you as a homeowner for this project. Note that the top line is in green. There's been a lot of discussion about the 58 cent average over the life of the project. That figure is accurate. But from the time these numbers were first published by FinCom, we have not focused on that number. We have instead focused on the impact over the first 5 years, as we believe those figures to be more relevant than the average, and that's the $1.27 number. Another note, these numbers have not changed since they were presented at the SBEC forum. Also, to clear up any confusion, interest is included in these figures. Now that's the end of the presentation that we made at the SBEC forum. Now I'd like to address some of the questions and issues that have arisen since the forum. The first one is over averages, and this is probably the biggest one. Probably the biggest concern that's been expressed is that some folks are just uncomfortable with the fact that FinCom used averages. Averages, by definition, smooth out extremes into more normal numbers. And even though we clearly disclosed the highest year tax impact in year 3 of $1.78, some folks were apparently concerned that the averages were hiding something. Let me be really clear on this. We were not then, and we are not now trying to hide anything. The only reason we use the averages is because of the difficulty of presenting 29 years worth of data in a clear and understandable format. In an effort to dispel any concerns that might still exist about using averages, we've created this graph that you have in your packet. Now, I know it's difficult to see, which is why we didn't use it originally, but the graph shows the increase of the impact in the increase in the impact in the first couple years, going up to the $1.78 high point in the third year. After that, the impact declines gradually over the next 6 years until dropping considerably in year 10 when the state reimbursement kicks in, which is why you see that drop. The graph also shows the negative impact in the last 8 years. You really can't see the numbers. I apologize for that. And that results from the reimbursement from the state being higher than the net cash outlay by the town. Questions have also been raised about the financing plan and why costs are higher in the early years and if they can be reduced. A couple of points on the financing plan in general. The financing plan is not part of the vote that is being taken tonight or on November 5th. The permanent financing plan will be determined by the town manager, whoever that may be, the treasurer, whoever that may be, and the fiscal agent may still be Clark. With the approval of the Board of Selectmen, again, whomever that may be, sometime after construction financing is arranged via bonds of construction, bond anticipation notes, or just short-term notes. Now, regarding the financing plan that was used to come up with the numbers that we're using tonight, the plan used is what is most likely given today's interest rate, bond market, and other factors. The plan components are not set in stone, but the plan is, and this is a quote, and it's a quote from the man, the fiscal agent sitting right there. Please don't disagree with me. But the plan is accurate enough to provide a reasonable estimate of the cost. Consideration will be given as to how to address concerns such as quote-unquote high early year costs to taxpayers when the permanent plan is designed. Some have asked us that we show the impact of other options that had lower impact in the early years. If we were to do that, we'd run into a few problems. First of all, FinCom's goal is to present what the most likely impact is. Those other plans are not what is most likely today. This plan is. Second, if we were to present another option that had a lower impact in the early years, we would run the risk of underestimating the actual plan cost, and we do not want to do that. Third issue, the request to lower the cost in the early years has to be balanced against the long-term financial impact in the town. Just generally, if we were to bring the cost down in the earlier years, it would inflate the cost of the total project. It's not bad or good, that's just a fact. You can't have everything in your financing plan, so you have to pick and choose what you get. Further, we were afraid that if we were to present those other options, there would be some folks who felt that we were purposely lowballing the cost to get this project passed. That's why we're only presenting this one option tonight. Next is new growth. Part one, why should we include it? Some of the questions regarding the growth rate related to why we need to use one at all. Why not just assume the worst case, that there'll be no future growth in the town beyond what we already have? If there isn't going to be any growth, why are we looking to build a new school? You can't include growth on only one side of an equation. If the new school is being built partially due to the continued growth of the town, that growth needs to be included in computing the financial impact of that project. There will always be growth in town, addition to existing homes, new single-family homes, empty lots, and tear-downs once all the lots are full. And finally, the zero growth assumption is totally unrealistic. How many construction sites did you pass on your way here? I passed 3. To achieve no new growth beyond what Ashland already has, we'd have to stop work on all of the residential construction being built right now in town. We have to find a way to prevent Gaynor and Fafford from ever building anything on their land. That is not likely or realistic. It's always enticing to use a worst-case scenario, but using no new growth as that worst-case scenario is so unrealistic that it makes the results meaningless, which is why we didn't do it. Growth rate part 2, what if the rate used is too high? Questions have been raised about the growth rates that we use in our figures, and I want to give you some additional details on those. The normal growth rate that we used was 4.2%. That 4.2% is 10% lower than what we actually did last year. It's 7% lower than what we actually did 2 years ago. No growth, as I said before, was included after year 10 to ensure that we did not overestimate growth. And finally, nothing, as I said, was included for Fafford's proposed sand pit project. That project alone could increase the town's valuation by 10%, would have a huge impact on these costs, but we did not include it because it's not imminent, and we didn't know if it was reasonably certain because the zoning hasn't passed. But people still say, what if, despite all that, the actual growth came in lower than we projected? If actual growth came in roughly 20% lower than what we estimated, the increase in the average tax impact in the first 5 years would be 3 cents, from $1.27 to $1.30. The increase is also 3 cents in the highest year, from $1.78 to $1.81, and also 3% in the overall average of the project. So we've got very conservative growth rates, and even if we're high, there's not much of an impact. Next issue has come up about the revenue from new growth. All revenue that comes into the town goes into the general fund. It doesn't go to specific projects or departments or expenses. It all goes into the general fund. The only way that any funds are earmarked for anything is by a town meeting vote. A good way to understand this is to take a quick look at the components of the town's revenues, and this gets a little confusing. We start off with the prior year tax levy. Proposition 2.5 allows us to increase that levy 2.5% a year. Then we add in new growth revenue. That gives us the current year tax levy, which is the funds available for the town for operating expenses. Add to that items excluded from Proposition the Prop 2.5 limit. This project, for example, would fall outside of Proposition 2.5. So the costs to pay off this project have nothing to do with the current year tax levy. They're outside of it. Adding those two together gives you the total tax base. Divide that by the town valuation, and that's where your tax rate comes from. The final issue we want to address are assessments and revaluations. Assessed value is not the same as market value. Assessed value is almost always lower. I think I can generalize. The exception would be folks moving into brand new homes who've just moved in. Assessed value is the value on which you pay property taxes. Market value is how much someone would pay you for the property. If you're unsure of your assessed value, you can look at last year's real estate tax bill. You can't look at the one that's due in a couple weeks. Those are estimates. They don't have a value on it. You have to look at last year's. Or you can call the assessor's office. If you take that number, let's say it's $270,000, take 270, multiply it times the tax rate impact for whatever year we showed you, and that's what it will cost you. The tax impact figures are based on the current assessed value, not the market value. A lot of people saying, well, my house is worth $400,000. Yeah, but it's assessed for $250,000. You're only paying taxes on the $250,000. The tax impact of the proposed school will generally not be affected by this year's revaluation. The town is going through a revaluation process, and that is a process of redetermining the value of all the properties in town. Since the total value of all the properties in town will increase, and Proposition 2.5 limits our tax levy, the tax rate generally comes down. So the result of that is that most property owners will not see a measurable change in their taxes due to revaluation. Now, these revaluation numbers will not be out until Dexter. Revaluation will be out when? With December tax bill. What you should absolutely positively not do is take that valuation and multiply it by this tax rate impact and get your answer. You'll be very upset and you'll be very wrong. These tax impact figures are based on current valuations. You do not hold with new valuations. You have to go through and do all new figures. Final thought, finally. FinCom's goal was to provide a reasonably accurate estimate of the most likely tax impact. Assumptions used are based on historical actuals, expert opinions, or both, and were purposely conservative. I'd be more than happy to come back to you in a few years and say, well, it didn't cost that much. But I'm not coming back here to tell you it costs more. The figures presented should be considered a worst-case scenario, except for a dramatic spike in interest rates or some other drastic change which I can't think of. What each of us will actually pay may be lower than what we're showing here, but it shouldn't be more. As I said when I started, the goal tonight was to answer as many questions and concerns as we could. Hopefully we did that. If not, we'll try to answer them as many as we can during the discussion period. Thank you.
The facts are in. Our recommendation is before you. It's your decision. Thank you very much.
Okay, John. Thank you. Okay, we're going to proceed to discussion. Before we do, once again, I'm going to ask people if they can possibly come in. There's seats in the front on this section. There's a lot of seats on the bleachers over here. And before we get to voting, we're going to have to get everybody out of the back, or our tellers will not be able to take a vote. So, come on in. Maybe if people want to kind of move towards the middle of their aisles, leave any spaces open on the edges if possible. Squeeze in, meet somebody new. A lot of seats still over on this part of the bleachers. A lot of seats in the front on this section as well. Right here. Seats over in this section as well. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Seats over here, seats over here, seats over there. Okay. If everyone could be seated, please. Okay, we'll begin with discussion. Yes, ma'am. If everyone could please settle down so we can hear.
Yes, Claudia Lester, Fountain Street. This year, all the departments had to level fund their budget, and I haven't heard any discussion about how much a new school will cost as far as operation and maintenance. Nothing to do with the construction, but the yearly operation and maintenance. I have actually two questions. How will that impact our taxes? And second, where's the money going to come from? Since this year we had to level fund our budgets, obviously the town does not have enough tax money to let the different town departments do everything they had planned. Where will this money come from to operate and maintain a new school?
You want to field that?
I actually prefer like from the Finance Committee or the Selectmen.
Well, we'll let Dr. Hoffman.
We actually had a slide. We're having some technical difficulty, but I'd be happy to address the madam's question. First of all, I just want to clarify that originally the town leaders had requested that all departments level fund their budgets. However, not all of the departments, including the school department, ended up with level funded budgets. We couldn't do it. Not just the schools. Our budget went up 2.7%. If you were at the last town meeting when budgets were approved and you looked through that book, there were many, many departments, and I don't blame them. They couldn't do it. Neither could we. So I just want to clarify that. We have calculated that, and I wish I could show you this slide, there are going to be some new operating costs to open that school. When that school opens in 2005, 2006, there will be a short list of things that we don't have now that we will need just to get that building running. And I don't have the slide in front of me, but I can tell you what we calculated. It includes new utilities, naturally. There will be 5 new custodians in that building. There will be a maintenance person. There will be some ground supplies, not the equipment. If you purchase equipment for the grounds of the new school, that's part of the budget. The lawn mowers and all those things are included. We will also need to hire a new librarian because we share one now because we have high school, middle school in the same site. We'll need a librarian for the middle school. We will need a nurse for the middle school because we share that. That is $470,000 that we will have to find to operate the school in the year 2005-2006. Between now and then, we will need new teachers. It's not that I want new teachers. The kids are coming. There's nothing I can do other than lock the borders, which I don't think I could get away with. Between now and the year 2005, 2006, the projections, and they were within 2%, said we will have 379 new students in grades K through 12. If we didn't hire any new teachers between now and 2005, 2006, that would total about 20 new teachers. So between now and 2005, 2006, we will need to hire about 20 teachers, and that's probably a little conservative because I know I did not include any traditional special education teachers or potentially half-time employees for other services. But whether you build a new school or you don't need to build a new school, the school committee and I are going to say we have to have those professionals to provide the quality education. If they're sitting in a portable, or they're sitting in a computer lab turned into a classroom, or they're sitting in an art room that's now a classroom, those 20 teachers, the town and I and everyone in this room has to figure out how to hire them. So it is the fact that $470,000 is new. That is true. That's new operating. But those teachers, we're going to have to pay for them anyway. Thank you.
Just one more question.
Yes,
Either the selectmen or the finance committee, are we looking at an operational or permanent operational override given if the town goes or votes for a new school to fund it?
Mr. Chairman?
I knew this was coming, so we did some analysis in the FinCom, and I prepared a statement that I think says what we can commit to at this point. We have performed a forecast of the town's operating budget for next year, as well as the 4 subsequent years, using a variety of assumptions and scenarios. The good news is that we have a reasonable estimate for school and municipal operating expenses, next year's free cash and local receipts. The bad news is that we continue to be at risk of a budget shortfall depending on the level of state aid. To help minimize the risk of an operational budget shortfall next year, it appears right now, today, that the budgets will need to increase only nominally from this year's level. If there's a sizable reduction in state aid next year, or I would say any surprise, unforeseen expenses that the town manager could not tell you in a million years was going to happen that come up, like health insurance doubles in the next year because something happens, the town will face one of 2 options, and it will be up to the town to decide which option they want to vote for, a reduction in services or an operational override. We will not know whether we are facing either of these options until the state aid is announced next year, and at the earliest it will be announced in July. Keep in mind that Framingham and Natick have already gone public with several $million-dollar shortfalls next year. We do not see in any of our forecasts, conservative to the extreme, anything near those levels. We have included in our forecast the opening costs of the new school in January 2006. We do not anticipate any need of an operational override related solely to the opening of the new school. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Mr. Shapiro.
Arthur Shapiro, 180 Myrtle Street. My comments actually are one of appreciation to all of you who have put countless hours into this massive project. You know, and I have to say particularly to John Nealon, John, you've been in front of town meeting year after year with resolve, and you've never given up. I've been in front of town meeting also. Town meeting can be vicious, but it's never slowed you down. And, you know, you of all I want to thank the most, and also Chair of Finance, that's a tough one too. And thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Joel Lopes, and I live at 377 Captain Eames. I am 66 years old, and my wife will be 65 shortly, so we are both essentially retired. I am here to speak for this project, and I'm here to represent my two grandchildren, one who is 7 and one is 2. I would just like to tell you a lot of things that sometimes you forget about. I went to a school system 35 miles from here where 30 of us, and we were all minorities, who started out in the kindergarten. Only 3 of us ended up graduating from high school, and only 1 of us went to college. That system today is run by Boston University, and they built all new school systems. I would also like to tell you that my family moved out here from Boston because our children were not going to be limited in education by the same kind of philosophy. And we moved out here to get a better education. They all went to college. One of them is a doctor. My daughter has her master's degree. And let me tell you, when you think about putting money in front of the only opportunities that your children are going to have, more than the golden opportunities that you should provide them, you certainly have to go home and look at yourself in the mirror and be ashamed of yourself. That's all I have to say.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Bill Peach, 70 Oak Street. What a tough act to follow. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, no matter how you're going to vote. Thank you for coming out tonight, because this is what makes the town work. It's very discouraging when they have a low turnout. And please, if you can stick around, don't leave right after this unless they end the meeting here and continue it on Monday. But stick around for the rest of the meeting, because we do have other important things to decide tonight. I'm actually here to let you know that I was misinformed when I was standing up here in the spring. I've learned a few things since then, and I think a lot of us are misinformed as well. And I'd like to clear up that misunderstanding tonight really quickly. How many of us think that right now we have 2 public high schools in the town of Ashland, 2 high school facilities? How many of us think we're there? Okay, good. I didn't think we'd get a lot. Now, how many think we have 1 public high school facility here in Ashland right now? Let's see the hands. Let's see. Okay, when I stood up here in the spring, I thought so too. The correct answer is 0. The school that we've been calling a high school was built in the 1960s as a middle school. We do not have a high school facility right now in the town of Ashland. We have high school students and high school teachers and a high school curriculum in a building that was built as a middle school. It doesn't just putting the big shiny plaque that calls it a high school and putting the high school students in there and the high school teachers and the high school curriculum does not make it a high school facility. If it did, we could solve a lot of problems with just a few shiny plaques, right? But we can't do that. The reason it would be so expensive to make the existing middle school that we've been using as a high school a real high school is because it was never built as a high school. It was built as a middle school. We could let it revert to what it was built to be, and it would cost the town next to nothing to use it as a middle school. To try and make it into a high school is a very expensive proposition, but we need a high school facility somewhere in the public schools in Ashland. We do not have one today. If I had known that, I would definitely have talked about that a lot in the spring. I thought that we just had a high school facility that was a little out of date. It looked weird when I was inside of it, but when I was told it was built as a middle school, everything made sense. The dimensions are wrong. The labs that aren't there were never intended to be there. And if we take $12 to $15 million of our money and convert that half of the middle school into a high school, that's a waste of our money. It doesn't. We have two problems to solve here tonight in terms of the building. One is we do not have a high school today. Everybody who held up your hand, you were just as misinformed as I was, okay? We have 0 high school facilities in Ashland right now. We need to step up and live with that reality. I don't know why the last expansion committee didn't tell you that, but it's true. We need to deal with reality. The other thing that we need is more classroom space. Renovating the middle school we've been pretending is a high school doesn't do anything for that problem, okay? And that's why what the building committee has told us is true. The most cost-effective solution for our community, for our town, is to build a new high school. Let the existing school that was built as a middle school be an excellent middle school. The accreditation issues that we face, they're facilities issues. It's not because our teachers aren't good enough. It's not because our students aren't good enough or motivated. It's not because our parents are doing a bad job. It's because the core facilities are missing. And nobody had to tell those people that we were using a middle school as a high school. I know they figured it out on their own. You know, they do this as their job. They're familiar with a lot of different schools. They told us things that we didn't know about our schools that needed to change. So those are the two problems we need to solve tonight, and the only way to solve them is to pass this proposal. Really, it is the most cost-effective. And if we don't pass it tonight, it's going to be a long time before we have anything to vote on. Okay, now, wait. Thank you very much. There are two other reasons why if you, well, real quick, this is really quick. Just one more point, then, okay?
Let's please be polite here for everybody, okay?
How many of you attended public school? How many of you? Real quick, okay? Okay, Mr. Moderator, it has been the tradition.
I attended public school.
In the United States, Mr. Moderator, we never pay for our own public education. The people of the community pay for our education, and then when we grow up and we either rent or buy houses in the community and we pay taxes, we repay what was given to us by paying for the public education of the children who come after us. That's our responsibility. Okay. It's always been that way in America. This isn't about paying for your own kids. This is about repaying what the public school system did for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Malone. Ms. Malone.
Sherry Malone, 10 Ivy Lane. I don't have an emotional plea. I have some questions for clarification, please. It says right on the first chart that there are 988 new students, and I was just interested in understanding whether that was based on the census or whether it was based on projections. And the reason for my question is population trends have changed a little bit recently in that people have fewer children, and there are many of us like me who don't have any children, but I'm just curious how that number came to be. And I thought I also heard you mention it was raised from 900 in the spring to 985, so I was just interested in that, please.
Dr. Hoffman.
Thank you. The question was about the enrollment projections, and last year we hired a company, Merrimack Education Center, that does these studies in many school districts across the state, and they do a number of factors. They do look at birth rate, and they do what's called a birth cohort survival rate, which very briefly means this is how many kids were born, how many of them showed up in kindergarten or first grade.
and they come up with a mathematical formula based on 10-year past history. And then they look at obviously they can only go to, first over the last 5 years, and then they have to project the additional 5 years to put together a 10-year enrollment projection. They also looked at trends in housing turnover. They worked with the town planner to get a sense of turnover in town. In particular, we asked them to look at homes, single-family homes that were owned by people over 55 that were purchased in the past couple of years by families. And so we looked at that. We also looked at, in town already, how many students attend the public schools from condominiums or from apartment complexes. And we used those similar formulas to project some students for the Gainer project. We did not include any potential students for, we've been calling it the Stanford. I wish I knew the real name of that project. But we did not include any potential students from that particular development because it's not on board yet. But we think it was a pretty good study. We asked them to go back out actually 2 more years, so that's where the kids came from. Many of the kids, the enrollment trend in 2013 will still grow, but at a slower rate, but it impacts mostly at the high school. Their rate's going to go up almost 60%. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Tom Kennedy, 26 Stagecoach Drive, Ashland, Mass. My first question is, a lot of the funds that we're going to be using will be based on like bonds and loans and stuff like that. This question's to the Finance Committee. Is there any way to kind of fix in the interest rate so that there's no excess costs or like surprise costs over the long run? And my other question is that I asked this back in the spring. Is there any other outside fundraising for this project? I really believe in it, but the other problem is I don't want to see tax rates go straight through the roof, and which is obviously going to be a huge problem for most of the people in this town. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, if it's okay with you, I'd like to defer the first part of that question to the fiscal agent if he's willing.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. My name is Clark Rowell. I'm from Unibank Fiscal Advisory Services, and I do act as a financial advisor to the town. Unfortunately, no, there is no practical way to lock in interest rates now. For those of you that have been hearing a little bit about the financing plan, though, the effort we are making is proposing that at least a portion of the bonds be issued as quickly as convenient, and that would allow at least a portion of it to be locked in at today's very low rate. But for the portion of the financing that will be issued as notes and likely renewed again and again until the reimbursement, or at least until soon as close to the reimbursement as possible, there is no practical way to lock in.
Yeah, Dr. Hoffman.
If I may, just the gentleman had a question about grants, and in the last round we had applied for what's called a Green Schools grant, that a $30,000 design and also $600,000 to help implement. Green Schools just means making a school not only just environmentally safe, but also one that's energy efficient. We had to return that grant, unfortunately, because we didn't get approval at the ballot box, but we reapplied, and we're hopeful that that will still come through. The federal government recently did provide grants for capital improvements to school systems. However, they're basically going to cities and towns across Massachusetts, across the country really, that have very low poverty rates. So the feds haven't helped us at all. So we're trying to keep other grants on our radar screen, and we will certainly apply for any and all that we can.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Hanna?
My name is Jim Hanna, if I can be heard, and I live at 65 Elliott Street in Ashland, and my questions are primarily financial. I want to make it very clear so I can save my life, is that I am totally in favor of a school expansion problem to be corrected. I understand the need clearly. I'm not in favor of the current choice. We've got 2 other alternatives. I'm not in favor of the current choice. I just want you to know that too. But I'm in favor of what you're after. So give me a break. Now, what I want to do is I want to introduce you only for a moment to a page that the Finance Committee has presented and how much the project will cost. And I'd like to offer to you an alternative to the one that's being presented. Always good to have another choice. And I'm not necessarily the most brilliant person in the world. I'm not a CPA by desire or demand, but I do know numbers with some help. So I decided I needed help from someone to figure out what's going on. And I'm like yourself, I was sitting home having some warm coffee on a Sunday morning when I read the school committee's review report that had some financial information in it. I was first impressed because for the first time in at least 4 years, they recognized interest as an expense in the school project. And I said, well, we're getting there. I looked at the numbers and I said, well, I'm happy with the numbers. And I was ready to have my second cup of coffee, and I moved to the next page and started talking about cost per thousand on your tax rate. And I couldn't believe my eyes when I got down to 22 cents a thousand. I mean, I've lived in this town for 60 years, and I have never in my life seen 22 cents a thousand. Maybe my father did when he first came here, but I never did. So I said, it raised a question with me from a financial point of view. So I decided, well, get into the act and start looking. So I got a hold of my friend, Senator Mignani, and I said, please get me an audience with the State Building Commission. Because you talk to people, you get the information firsthand. So he did. I raised 5 questions. I couldn't see it personally, but I gave Dave 5 questions to have it asked and answered by the School Building Commission. Now, the first question was, what is the overall plan by the School Building Commission when they give out money and take away money and do all this approval stuff? They said, well, first of all, we're in some form of a financial dilemma, and what we've done is we've allowed communities to submit their plans. If they're approved, we notify them that there is no reimbursement to be seen for the first 7 years. And that's brought about by the fact that the economic conditions of the state of Massachusetts is obvious to all of us, and not all of it has been yet discovered. It's soon to come out. But anyways, so they dragged out 7 years. They said, well, what you've got to do is you've got to bond yourself for the first 7 years. And they gave a name band or bond anticipated notes. I never understood the damn stuff, but that's what they gave it the name. But they said you can go out and take a yearly rate on a short-term note. A short-term note means a lot less expense interest-wise than a long-term note. I did understand that. So I said, okay, what would you use? You are the guys who were giving the states the funding. What would you use for an interest rate for the first 7 years? They said between 3 and 4% for your program. So I used 3.5 to be, I guess, conservative. Then I said, what happens at the end of the 7th year? At the end of the 7th year, the town must enter into a full bond for the $42 million, which then charges principal and interest for the remaining 18 years. And I said, what's 18 got to do with it? Can you have 20 or 30? And the answer was no. Under the state bylaw, you cannot have a bonding period any longer than 25 years. And the front 7 years counts towards that. So you can only have a note for 18 years from the 8th year out. So I said, okay, what interest rates do I use? And they said, use between 6 and 7. I use 6.5. I gave all the information to my CPA, and he pumps out a number. And the number, and I'm going to just give you a few changes. The interest expense of 27.78 that's currently being projected by the Finance Committee could also be 39. And because there is $9 million of interest in the front end 7-year loan that you're going to pay for up front without any reimbursement, and then the reimbursement of that will take place over 15 years as it's parceled out during that period of time. And the state reimbursement against the new total is $45,253 instead of their number of $39.10. The net cash outlay of the plan the state gave me to follow came out with $35 million and some change.
Jim, speak right into the
I'm
mic.
sorry, $35 million and some change. That's the number there. And now, is it 30 or 35? Don't know, I haven't any idea. But one thing you must also understand is this is not a subtraction game. It's not a net zero game. What happens is you sign up for a note of $42 million, and the banks give you a nice contract to sign, and it says at the end of 25 years, you're going to owe me $80 million. You're going to pay it according to this particular schedule. So much interest and so much principal, and you'll do that for 25 years till it's all paid out, just like your home mortgage. Now, that's fun. The town signs up for that. Now, over here in left field is state contributions to Chapter 70. And in the 8th year, some $2 million is going to come in that window and drop into the general fund. And that's going to be used, hopefully, to pay the school bill, but maybe not. We may have a new ball field wanted, new soccer, this, whatever the case may be. The money may not be all there, so you'll use some of that. But I'm trying to tell you, this is not a simple plus and minus game. There is expense in there. Just want you to understand it. So you know how to vote this thing. Now, getting into this, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take too much time, but this is very interesting. We're into the part of the curve where we're down to the 25 and 22 cent level, and I've got $1.25, $1.30 being paid. So I asked the difference, and I got an answer. I did not include growth in my number. Well, I had no reason to. I didn't even know what it was. I have no idea what a growth is. But they did, and they said, we put growth in here, and with growth, your tax base is going to expand, and you're going to have more tax money coming in. It's going to cost you less than we're down to 22 cents. Okay. I had nothing else. I didn't know what it was. So I went to the assessors department, Ashland Assessors, who, by the way, weren't visited by the particular finance committee to check their results. And I said, give me a histogram on your last 8 years of free cash in the town of Ashland. And here's the answer. Now, sit tight. This is the answer. So from 1996 until 2002, Ashland has had an evaluation increase of $245 million. The tax generated on an annual basis out of that growth is $4,200,000 in round numbers. That's cash that came into the system from growth, except something got in the way. We had plans to use that money. So for the last 8 years, we've had all this growth, and we've spent tax dollars that are associated with it. That's fact. Now, they're projecting a picture where they're going to have new growth in the future, and apparently nothing's going to attack that. I'd question that only because if it misses, you're paying. I want to thank you all for that time. I appreciate it very much, and do what your soul says to you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Jim. You answered some of my questions. Dave Pelletier, 23 East Union Street. I got some questions on, we were talking about the school thing last year, and the figures were $42 million. Now we're down to what, 38, 37, somewhere in that neighborhood? I can't understand why last year you said that when you were going to go back to the drawing board, you were going to come up with a really good plan. I didn't think $2 million that you cut from last year to this year was really that much.
2.6.
2.6? I mean, if I know a town not too far from here that they built a brand new high school for 600 students, and it only cost them $28 million. So $28 million against 38, 37 is a lot of money. Yeah, I know, but I can't understand why we're up at the figure so high.
May I address that question? Is there a question? Go ahead. Is there a question?
Well, the question is, we're trying to build a school here for 40 some odd million dollars, and another town builds the same high school. Whitensville.
What other town is that?
Town of
specifically?
Whitensville just built a brand new high school.
Which one?
Whitingsville.
There is
Northbridge, same thing. I grew up in Northbridge. $28 million.
Well, I don't, I beg your pardon? That was for 600 students, too.
600 plus students.
Right, and we're building one for 900.
So,
Which cost us $20 million more?
I'd also like to I'm sorry, go ahead. All right,
No, that cost us $20 million more.
Go ahead, it's a third more. There's a third more students.
Yeah, but
600 versus 900 is a third more.
But you can't predict that that's what's really going to happen in this. This is only projection figures. We don't know that for a fact.
Tony,
People move
Tony,
in, people
okay,
move out. I mean, the figures that you're throwing for 2013 is 900 students.
Okay, I think we understand the point.
It doesn't matter, but I mean, we're bouncing around.
Thank you. A couple things, just in terms of the enrollment projections. Early in the presentation, you noticed that the projections that we did in 1994 was done by the former committee for the project that was done for 13.8 was 2% off, somewhere in the vicinity of 50 students over 10 years. Now, you can, in fact, argue about projections and, being the estimates or whatever, but it's professionally done, and it's not guesswork. It's based upon largely the birth rate that's already in town today. Now, with regard to the question about building schools, we did an assessment of every school within that boarded us and every town that boarded them. Now, Northbridge, unfortunately, falls outside of that. In the last 15 years, we've been very, very efficient. We've spent a little over $13.8 million on our school building projects. 13.8. The average, take a look at some of the towns. Hopedale, with a population of 5,900, that's almost a third of ours, okay? 20 million. Miller, no growth. They don't have land to grow. It's marshland. 7,900 population, 14 million. Dover-Sherburne, obviously Dover-Sherburne, well, 58 million. Nipmuc, all right? Nipmuc. That's Menden-Upton. Menden-Upton, 60 million. They outspend Dover-Sherburne. Uxbridge. You remember Uxbridge turned down a program last year because they put $25 million into their high school in 1996. We're at 13, they're at 25. Take a look. The average expenditures to every single town that borders us and every single town that borders them, that's what I call the Metro West community, has spent on average $57 million in the last 15 years. We've spent 13.8. That's stark reality. All right? I don't know where you expect. So, I'll tell you, and take a look at the growth figures. In 1980, this town was 7,900 people. You want to know where the kids are coming from? The greatest generation gave us baby boomers. I'm one of them, okay? You have more of me than you had of them. And all the houses that we're living in are producing kids. And guess what? My kids are producing kids. I mean, I hate to say that. But the simple fact is, we're growing. Take a look at the growth rate of every single town in Metro West. We have 60% growth since 1980. 60%. From 14,674 in 2000, year 2000, in 1980, we were like 7,900. So, my goodness, take a look around and see what people are expending. Now, you say a high school. That's one building. What did Northbridge build for a junior high school? What did Northbridge build for a middle school?
They already got them.
They built more. They added on.
They didn't.
Take a look.
1957, they added on a wing, and I was there. And that school's still there.
Take a look.
That's a junior school.
Okay. We really need to move on. Take a look at these figures,
Okay.
and
Tony.
I beg to differ. Thank you.
We need to move on. We need to move on. Okay?
I know what you're saying, Tony, but what I'm saying is, in the tax pocket, you're reaching in my pocket, that I feel that this town is going above what a lot of us can't afford.
Okay.
That in this school, the classrooms in some of these schools, and I've heard it from somebody else, that there's only 13 kids in one teachers teaching it.
All right,
I know that for fact.
all right.
So, I mean, you know, if you added on to the Minder School and put a wing on it, would accommodate a lot of what's going on now, and it wouldn't cost us this kind of money.
Well, okay, thank you. We're going to move on. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Randy Weiner from Orchard Road. There's been ample opportunity for everyone in this town to voice their opinion at town hearings. My question to you, sir, is how does one make a motion to vote right now?
I'm not going to take that motion.
Obviously, the volume of this applause is going to tell you a whole lot.
I'm not going to take that motion at
I asked the
this
question
time.
was how does one make a motion, not no. The question was
I'm going to rule that motion out of order. I'm going to give people
no.
a chance
It's
to
a question, sir. How does one make a motion?
I moved to the question, but I'm not going to take it. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Sarah Hines, 321 Elliott Street. I agree that you need expansion. I still think that they could... I agree that there's a need for expansion in the schools of some kind, but I still see that there's not as much focus on cost saving as there could be, nor are all the things included, such as you're going to have to redesign the intersection of East Union with Route 135 because it's not safe the way it is for school buses. There is, looking through the fees that are up here, I still think that, you know, we should look at more creative things, like we have $600,000 down there for construction administration. Hopkins had hired their own town construction administrator for about $70,000 or $80,000 a year. Some of that more creative looking at how to get the cost of this down, because as Mr. Hanna says, we will be paying for this and the interest on it for a long time. There are a number of design issues. Are we still looking at curved roofs and, you know, expensive design solutions here? Or, you know, I know we have the formulas. We set up the cost based on these formulas. But that's not, we need to look beyond the simple formulas for ways to get this project as affordable as we possibly can. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hi, John McGrath, 367 Union Street. I'm just a little concerned as far as how far out in the future this project is actually looking. Based on the presentation and the 1997 renovations, it seems in 5 years the schools are already outgrowing those renovations. And that according to the projected growth that seems like a big topic, that the new high school in the presentation looks like it'll reach capacity 7 years after it opens its door. And I'm just wondering if we're going to be doing this all over again every 5 years because we're not looking far enough into the future. I mean, I don't mind spending some money for necessary things, but I don't want to do it every time the vote comes up. I mean, I'd rather take care of it. And
Mr. Nealon.
Very good question. One of the restraints that the FBAD program puts on a city or town, and this is statewide, not just Ashland, is that they ask you, and in fact tell you, you have to project out 10 years. We believe that it's a little misleading by the state to require us to do that because the process, as we all know, can take 2 to 3 years to get off the ground. However, the state doesn't let you take that into consideration. What we have done, though, is since May, we have updated the figures through a recommissioned study to confirm the numbers and to see if we are off by any great degree. And I'm happy to say we were not. There were some additions with the Gaynor apartments and some other little tweaks, but essentially the numbers remain steady. And again, we're projecting about 988. We do have a mild concern, to be very frank with you, that come 2013, maybe 2015, the building will start to see some form of capacity with respect to the students. However, one of the great things about this plan, we feel, is the flexibility that we've built into the plan. And it's going to be designed so that additional classrooms will be able to be built at a minimal cost. And by that I mean the location for where they can be located is going to be left free of any impediment. The infrastructure will already be in the building. And the core facilities, gymnasium, cafeteria, library, we believe will take us well beyond 2013, well into the up into the 2020s because we are making them big enough to accommodate what will be continued growth. But there are limitations on how much and how far we can build out. Thank you.
Mr. Wagner. Mr. Wagner.
John Wagner, 17 Diane Lane. The article actually reads that the article can be moved if you receive written evidence, or the school can be constructed if you receive written evidence that you're placed on a priority list or any other similar list to make you eligible, the words in here, for reimbursement. If we do not get reimbursement, do we have a project? Will the town continue to move forward on the project on its own?
The procedure by which the SBAB funds these projects is the following. If we pass this matter at the town election on November 5th, we will complete our filing sometime in March for this year's round of funding. By June 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year, the state will make the decision on which projects will be funded. Nothing will be done in terms of going out to formal bid until we receive what's called a proceed to construct letter from the state. And that essentially is the notification from the state that your funding has been assigned and that it will be forthcoming. Mr. Hanna brought up the issue of when we might receive state funding. Up until last year, all projects received funding within the first 5 years after their approval. There is a backlog of projects within the state. A lot of cities and towns are experiencing the same growth that Ashland is. So the legislature last year increased that time period to 7 years. Does that add an increased expense to the overall project? Of course it does, because it's 2 more years that we have to fund it. It's not just Ashland, it's every city and town in Massachusetts.
Is there a possibility that we will not be funded? And in that case, are we committed to the construction of this project?
I'll answer your second question first. The answer to that is no. And is there a possibility that we won't be funded? We have to apply first. Strike that. We have to pass the matter first this evening. We would have to pass the matter at the November 5th election, and then we would have to apply for the funding. I will tell you that the history of the SBAB up until last year, that every city and town that ever received the commitment letter from the state always receives their funding. And the commitment letter I'm speaking to is the proceed to construction letter that you received on or about July 15th, in our case in 2003.
Thank you. I'd like to move the question.
We'll let a couple people who are up there.
Marcia Rennie, 41 Bay Colony Drive. It probably could go without saying, but we were all here last spring, and it looked like an overwhelming victory. I'm hoping that happens again tonight at town meeting. But it doesn't do us any good if we forget November 5th. So please, if you're here to support it, and we succeed tonight, don't just vote on November 5th. Take 5 people with you to vote, and make sure we vote.
Mr. Hoffman.
8 Hilldale Road. Several times in the presentation this evening, there has been mention of the Wildwood project, which some people are calling the sand pit, and of course that's before us at a later article in this town meeting. And both the FinCom and the SDEC refrained from giving you any estimates based upon figures from that, in order to allay the concerns of some voters. And I understand perfectly well that condominiums do not add very much in the way of school children. Could someone from either committee or perhaps the Board of Selectmen give us some numbers as to anticipated number of children per unit in that condominium development, so we will have some sense of what additional we might be expecting by the time this school opens?
Mr. Schuster.
the Finance Committee will be making a presentation on Monday or whenever it is that article is brought forth. That is included in there, but I believe the number is 1.14 child per each 10 units, and that is based upon the town's history of the past 10, 15 years.
Over 500 units, is it, I believe?
Over 500 units.
Yeah. So we would anticipate about 50 to 60 additional children out of that total.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Catherine Della Femina on 50 Prospect Street. And I have two questions. The first is, I understand that the new high school would not be ready until 2006 in January. What happens with our current accreditation problem that we're facing right now?
Dr. Hoffman?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Right now, the high school accreditation is on what's called warning status, and they actually told us that we needed to submit a remedy for the facility by November 1st. We called them and said, we need at least another week. They said, fine. And I don't mean to make light of this, but it was an awkward phone call, but they said, sure, November 6th, let us know. Anyway, in the interim, if this plan passed November 5th, the accrediting agency, I really can't speak to them fully, but having worked with them in several other instances, they would basically say that they have accepted our plan to resolve the issues, and they might leave us on warning until, the state approval and the project goes out to bid and gets going. And warning doesn't appear. I know I got some calls from people this year saying, is there a stamp somewhere on the kids' transcripts? There isn't. Our transcripts still say, and we're allowed to say this, that our high school is fully accredited by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. And that's all that a college sees when they get, doesn't say warning anywhere. The problem is, and this isn't a threat, I'm just telling you what they've told me, if we do not have a plan approved, they will likely put us on what's called probation, and then they will tell us when the situation must be remedied by. And they might give a year, they might give 2 years. And frankly, they don't have any, if we build a new high school or if we renovated the old one, they just want those issues fixed. They're not married to a new school or any of these plans, but they would want to do those. And one caveat for those of you that have older children, in the repair piece, one of the big issues at the high school is heating and ventilation, and it's safe, but, one room is 40 degrees, one room is 80 degrees. You're laughing, and your kids know that. That will be fixed as soon as, we're going to bundle those repairs with this whole project, and we would hope to fix that within the first year, as soon as the state approves that piece. So those things and some of the things that our current students are living with, we would fix. The things we can't fix without a major project are, obviously the additional classrooms, the wider corridors, the expanded guidance space for teachers. And we would have to come up with something, whether it be portables or move the middle school or do something, or we would risk losing accreditation. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
David Mirati, 24 Douglas Road. I have more of a statement than I do questions. My statement is I'm a service worker. I work 26 weeks a year to pay my taxes, and I really don't need any more. And the proposals that you're proposing tonight are going to be probably about $300 more a month in taxes. I can't afford that. I'll be moving out of this town probably. So I am one of them 28 no votes, and I will be one of the 28 possibly no again. So that's my statement.
Okay. Are we, something
I
new?
just had a second question that I didn't get to ask, and that
Okay.
was, I suppose you'd have to be totally comatose not to know who Stafford is in your town. But I am clueless as to who Gaynor is, and I was wondering if somebody could just tell me.
Anyone want to say anything? No. Anybody will tell you. Yes, Larry. Yes, Larry.
Larry DeYoung, Sudbury Road. I live in town. I've taught in the town for 32 years. I've lived in the town for 25. I can say that teaching in the high school has changed a lot. When the school was built, 65, it was designed for an addition, which was built in 69, 70. I started in 70. The years from then till now, I've seen enormous changes. The town, as every town around, is growing. It will not stop. It will not stop. How you deal with it, with planning board issues, conservation issues, and school issues, you must address today and tomorrow and the very foreseeable future. You pay the taxes and you make the decisions. From a personal point of view, I'm going into retirement in 2 years. I do not look forward to paying extra money for taxes. I've never had kids go through this system. I am willing to pay for some type of school expansion. I don't relish it, but I'm willing to pay for it. And I'm slowly making amends in my budgeting to try to allow for it. I would like to stay in this town. I like the town. But I'm not thrilled, but I recognize the fact that it has to be expanded in many different ways, and it's going to be costly. I can tell you from a personal point of view in teaching in the classroom that I am teaching classes this year I have never taught the likes of. And it's not going to change. It's going to get worse until a new facility is built. We need a high school that is strictly 9 through 12, not 7 through 12. 9 through 12. The people in the 7th and the 8th grade should not be housed with high school students. I have seen that from the early 80s, and I believe it. I've lived it. I feel, despite the fact the cost that it's going to cost me personally, I am in favor of some type of school expansion. If this is the best alternative because of flexibility, timing, state reimbursement, and a number of other things, I go for it. If we hold off for 2 or 3 or 4 years, I will still be in favor of it, but it will cost me more. That's my speech.
Mr. Moderator? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Bob Richards, 28 Tudor Lane. My question really goes back to the reimbursement rates. I didn't feel entirely comfortable with the wording and the language that was used in either the questions or the answers. I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. Because when I read the warrant and it indicates that something will be placed on a list, that means to me that it's not secured, it's not for sure. So am I wrong in that? Or can it be on a list and not, it may not be guaranteed, and we have to wait for the commitment letter. And if we wait for the commitment letter, what does that mean for the project? I mean, the language was, are we still locked in? And that might be the wrong term. Perhaps the proper term is, what happens to the project if it's on the list, but we're not given a commitment? Does it proceed? Does it not proceed? What are the legalities involved in that?
Mr. Nealon.
The application procedure is completed by June 30th. It's actually completed a lot sooner than that, but decisions aren't made by the state until June 30th or shortly thereafter. To say you're on the list after June 30th is, and that's something we would hear from the DOE and through our representatives from the state. We would hear whether or not we made the list for funding. And then officially you receive what's called a proceed to construct letter approximately 2 to 3 weeks later in July. I think the intent of your question is, could we possibly start building this project and not be guaranteed the money? I think that's really what your question is.
Yes.
And the answer to that is no.
Okay.
Because, first of all, the bidding process would occur throughout the summer after we are on the list, and the groundbreaking would take place long after we received our proceed to construct letter. So there is absolutely no intention whatsoever for the town to be saddled with a $42 million project that isn't part of the state reimbursement program.
Okay, I wasn't sure, and I wanted to, be totally clear on that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Karen Weiner, 70 Blue Jay Lane. I want to thank everybody up at the front table for the presentations tonight. I want to thank everybody in this room coming. Remember to stay for reconsideration. And, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to move a question.
Okay. Okay, now, once again, for our tellers to count, we're going to have to try to get everyone who's standing in the back into a seat. So, if there are seats next to you, could you just raise your hand so people can see? There's seats all over the place. Thanks. Let's get everyone into a seat. Okay. All right, just while people get settled, just a word on how we're going to vote. We're going to take Article 7 first, and then we'll vote on Article 6. So we're going to vote about the money first, and then Article 6 later, which is the transfer of the land to the school committee. That's the order in which we're going to do things. These votes will require a two-thirds vote, both of these, and so we're going to have standing votes. Okay. Any questions about that? No. Good. All right. When we finish the two votes, I will look for somebody if somebody wants to make a motion with respect to reconsideration. I'll look for that. Okay. All right. All right. Now. Okay. So, with respect to Article 7, I think I'll just read the Finance Committee's recommendation one more time. On the Finance Committee recommendation that the town hereby appropriates the sum of $41,970,000, pay the cost of constructing, furnishing, and equipping new school facilities at the so-called Cadre property, and to renovate and or repair the several existing school facilities in the town, and that to meet this appropriation, the town treasurer, with the approval of the selectmen, is hereby authorized to borrow said amounts pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 7, parentheses 3 and 7, parentheses 3A, and Chapter 70B of the general laws, and pursuant to any other enabling authorities, and to issue bonds and notes of the town, therefore, provided, however, that no funds be borrowed or expended hereunder, unless the town shall have voted to exclude the amounts required to repay any bonds or notes issued hereunder from the limits of Proposition 2.5 so-called, and provided further that except for funds needed to pay costs of planning and design of the project to be undertaken by this vote that must be accomplished in order to apply for school building assistance grants on account of such projects, no funds shall be borrowed or expended for any project authorized hereunder until the town shall have received written evidence that such project shall have been placed on the school building assistance priority list maintained by the Department of Education of the Commonwealth or any other similar list, and that the town is eligible for reimbursement at a rate of not less than 56.05%, and that the School Building Expansion Committee formed on Article 8 of the October 2001 annual town meeting be authorized to negotiate and enter into the contract for the purposes of this article. That's what we'll vote on, the Finance Committee's recommendation. All those in favor, please rise. Let me walk backwards. Let me walk backwards. Okay. If you're standing in the back of the hall, your vote will not be counted. You need to get into a seat. Okay? The tellers will not count you if you're standing in the back of the hall. You need to get into a seat so that they can see where you are. Thank you. There are plenty of seats still in the front. There are chairs. And just everyone will stand quietly. There's a lot of people for the counters to count. As a point of information for everyone, once we completely finish with consideration of Articles 7 and 6, we're going to adjourn for the evening. So these will be the last two articles that we'll consider tonight. We will reconvene on Monday next, and it will be here at the school, but in the auditorium as usual. Not that hey, please come back. We love to see you. It's a great night, right? 7:30, it'll be Monday night, 7:30, but in down the hall in the auditorium. But don't run out because we just want to make sure we complete business on this tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been... Not yet. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been advised that when it's time for the meeting to adjourn, that the fire department is coming up for those people who are parked in the back, and they're going to portably light the area so that hopefully we'll have enough light for everybody who's exiting. Also, I've been asked to ask people to stay. I understand that there may be a couple of motions for reconsideration at the end of these considerations 6 and 7, and we'll want to deal with those as well. Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Shapiro. Left front. 96 on the left front. Okay, everyone can be seated. Thank you. Left front. Yeah. 89 on the right front. 149. Right rear 200. And 180. 18. Okay. Okay. All those opposed to the Finance Committee's recommendation, please rise and remain standing. Opposed. What do you think? Mr. Shapiro. Left front 9. Right front 5. Left rear 6. Right rear 20. 3. 2. 1. Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, could I have your attention? That's 921 in the affirmative, 46 in the negative, being more than 2/3, and that passes. And now we're going to move back to vote on Article 6. Article 6, the Finance Committee's recommendation is that the town vote to transfer the described parcel of land to the school committee conditioned upon the passage of Article 7 of this warrant, including an affirmative vote on a ballot question excluding debt payments on the appropriation in Article 7 from the limits of Proposition 2.5. So all those in favor of the Finance Committee's recommendation on Article 6, please rise and remain standing. There's 1,000? Yeah, just a majority. It's going to be a voice vote, or a no. People have to vote no. Yeah, well, I'll explain it. Mr. Shapiro. You can be seated now, thank you. Okay, all those opposed to the Finance Committee's recommendation, opposed, please rise and remain standing. Opposed. Shapiro. Left front 3. Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that vote being 827 in the affirmative, 10 in the negative, more than two-thirds, and Article 6 passes. Dr. Hoffman.
Vote of no.
Okay, with respect to Articles 6 and 7,
Can
we're
we do
going to
them
take
together
separate votes.
legally? Can we do them together?
We'll vote separately, but you can move it together.
I will move it together.
Okay. The reason that Dr. Hoffman is moving reconsideration is to foreclose changing the vote at a later time during the course of this town meeting, and the reason that he urges a vote of no is that there's one bite at the apple, and that will end the bite, right? Okay. So we'll take the motions in order. First, with respect to Article 6, question on reconsideration. All those in favor of reconsideration, please say aye. And all those opposed, no? No! I guess that loses. Okay, so that is lost. And now with respect to Article 7, all those in favor of reconsideration, please say aye. And all those opposed, no? And that is lost. And a motion to adjourn. So moved. We'll see you Monday night, 7:30 in the auditorium. Thank you very much for your work.